I didn't even know if I was be allowed to go to church because I didn't know people like me could go to church. You know, the whole town knew me as what my father was. You know, I had his last name, and he didn't have a good reputation. So I remember asking them, can I go to church? Is that something that I can
Asking
go to?
your husband's grandparents?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
I was like, you know, is it something that I would be allowed to do? Or, you know, I mean, I had never opened a Bible.
Yeah.
I had never read any scripture. I didn't know how any of this worked. But I just knew that I needed to try something. I had tried everything to stay clean. I needed to try something that I'd never tried before. And so, of course, they were ecstatic to find out that I wanted to go to church, you know? And so when they took me to church, it just so happened to be revival week.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. And so this is in the country. So, you know, revival week is big time, okay? There's lots going on.
I know
And,
exactly what you're describing.
so I went and, I remember I fell in love. I fell in love with, I wanted more. I wanted more of it. And so, of course, I asked them, will you take me tomorrow? Will you take me tomorrow? Because it was going on for a week. And they were like, of course we'll take you tomorrow. And so the third night that I was there, I had no idea what salvation was. I did not know. I honestly, anytime I'd heard it, maybe it was on a billboard or something, and I thought it was just something that people made up. I didn't know what it even meant. And so I went forward that night, and I gave my life to the Lord. Wow. And I remember that. I'll never forget that moment. It was powerful. Powerful.
It's an unbelievable picture of the Holy Spirit drawing you to himself. That's incredible.
From that moment on, the craving for drugs was gone. It
Really?
was gone, yeah. At this time, I had both of my boys. Jonathan and my oldest son, I call him Wolfie. His name's Gerard. I know. It's a nickname that stuck with him. He was just, when he was little, he was just all furry, and he still is. He's a furry adult. So as a mom, I just call him, I know, I probably embarrass him so much, but I just dove into church. We moved to Indianapolis to get away from my dad. I didn't tell anybody where I was going. I just started over. I got really involved in church. I mean, I was so on fire for the Lord. It's so exciting to think about because it's just something I realized at that very moment that that's what I would want. That's what I was looking for my whole life, and I didn't know. I just didn't know.
For it.
Yeah. And that's such an amazing feeling, you know, to finally find the thing that you had been, you could feel that void your whole life. And, you know, when I was younger, I struggled with depression. I struggled with being lost, confused, and all that was just taken from me. And so I just became really involved in church. I was teaching Sunday school. I had home fellowships at my house.
At Indianapolis?
Mm-hmm. I was going to Bible study all the time, and I raised my kids in church, and that's at that point, my husband was actively using our whole marriage. I honestly don't know how I stayed clean as long as I did, because he was still using meth, and he would just stay gone a lot. My marriage was really lonely for me, because he really wasn't there. He wasn't there for me like I needed him to be, and so I decided that I wanted to have one more child, and then that way I didn't want all my kids to be all different ages, so I was going to have one more child. And so I had my daughter, Tori. At this point, I was doing prison fellowship. I was actually going to the girls' school, and I was witnessing to them.
Incredible.
And yeah, it was just always my passion to help women, and I love teenagers. I love teenagers as well. As I was falling in love with Jesus even more, my marriage was falling apart even more. And I really tried. I tried to be. I thought the right thing for me to do, the godly thing, would be to stay with my husband. And at the time, I didn't have. You know, it's funny how you learn so much in life, right? Mm-hmm. The wisdom that nobody can take from you. But at the time, you know, I was in my 20s, and I was in recovery, and God was my recovery. God was my recovery. But I didn't have anybody else in my life that was in recovery. And so I had all these Christians that were surrounded me, but I didn't have anybody that was in recovery as a Christian. And so that's really important. It's really important because when I would try to seek counsel, you know, what do I do with my marriage? Do I stay with my husband or do I leave him? But as somebody who is in recovery, now, what I know now, you're playing with fire. You're playing with fire. And God wants you to protect your recovery, you know? And I'm not saying that he can't, restore. Of course, he restores anything. But I should have left. I should have left my husband long before I did. So I made one last attempt to save my marriage, and I begged him to go to a marriage retreat with me. We went to this marriage retreat, and he begged me. It was 4th of July, and he told me if we go to this, it was during the day, and then we went home at night. He's like, if we go to this, will you work with me and go to this party down the street that, you know, it's going to be a family party. It's a party, you know, with kids and everything, with fireworks and whatnot. So I agreed to it, and by the end of the night, I was on every drug that there was. I was on. It was.
Is that what kind of party it was? Was
no,
he going,
but
when you said work, was he going to deal, or was he just going to have a good time?
He wanted to go have a good time because he wasn't too thrilled about the marriage retreat that I was dragging him to.
Right.
But so I went to this party, and it wasn't like people were just out doing drugs. But my husband was high, and then when we went home, he literally just wanted me to get high, and I was like, no, I haven't gotten high for a long time. I don't do that. You know?
How long do you think were you clean?
It was almost 10 years. It was between 7 and 10 years.
Oh my goodness. So you're saying no immediately, and then you're wrestling with, am I going to make my marriage work? I'm trying to make my marriage work. I'm trying to make my marriage work. Should I do this in order to make it work?
Yeah, you know what? I said no so many times, and I could feel myself getting real weak. I mean, it was right there. And the whole reason for the marriage retreat was for me to connect with my husband. You know, I wanted to connect with him.
Yeah.
And so I felt so defeated. I felt so defeated because I wanted my family to stay together. I wanted my kids to have what I didn't have. Mm-hmm. But that's really hard to do when there's an active user in the equation.
Exactly.
And I had been praying so much. I read so many books and did so many Bible studies about how to be a good wife and how to pray for your husband. And at that point, I lost faith. I just lost my faith. I lost my faith for a minute. And I just was like, you know what? Forget it. I give up. I give up. Just forget it. If this is what you want, fine. This is what I'll do, you know? And I'm not blaming my husband. I'm not blaming him. It's my fault.
So you use meth right there on the spot.
Mm-hmm. I use meth. And so I was high for a couple days, and I couldn't not do that. I could not do that because it was so different this time. I had God in my heart, and it was not fun like it used to be.
So for the first time, you're remorseful for using drugs?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So I left I told him, I came home, and I told him, I'm leaving you, and I'm checking into rehab because I'm not doing this again. I am not doing this again. So I left him, and I checked into rehab. He was really mad that I left him. And he wanted to take my kids from me. And I just didn't understand why we couldn't. I told him, why don't we share the kids? You know, let's just have equal rights to the kids and move on with our lives. But he didn't want to do that. And so I didn't really know how to deal with this. My kids were gone a lot with him, and then when they'd come home, and it was really a terrible feeling. And so I literally struggled with why this was happening. I was trying to support my kids and move out on my own, which I had been a stay-at-home mom my whole marriage. So I went and got a job at the grocery store down the street, and I pretty much used all my money every week to pay for daycare. Mm-hmm. And I just realized that it was... that wasn't going to last for very long, you know. My divorce got really ugly, and When I left my husband, I didn't have anything. He didn't give me anything. So when I moved into my new house, I had nothing. And I became friends with, he was an acquaintance in my life at the time. He was my best friend's brother, actually. And so I quickly, as soon as I got divorced, I ended up getting into a serious relationship with him. But he was...
Are you living together
Yes.
at this time? Okay.
By this time, I had a decent job. And I was working, I had a house, I was doing really good.
And you're clean?
Clean.
And do you have all 3 of your children?
Yes.
Okay.
We started dating, and I had never been treated by any man like he treated me.
Positive or negative?
Yeah, it was positive. I had never had that feeling from any man, and he just treated me like just a queen. Like he just had so much. Every day it was just, he would express his love and for me, and would point out all the amazing things about me.
Wow.
And I'd never had that before, And he wanted to immediately get married, and I wasn't ready for that yet. But there was one thing that I ignored about this equation. He was an active alcoholic and drug user. And, but he was able to, at that time, maintain it. He worked, he had a good job, he worked. And
he was a functioning user, and a happy one, it sounds like.
Yes,
Yeah,
very happy
one.
one. Super happy one. I knew I shouldn't ignore this, but this was all new to me, all new. I'd never been respected by someone like that, the way that he respected me. And he was really honest he told me, I never want to hurt you, and so I want to tell you I'm an alcoholic, and I don't ever want you to think that I don't love you enough to quit for you, because I can't quit,
Wow.
And so as I was experiencing all this new kind of a relationship, it was just so amazing to me, just the way that he treated me. And looking back, it saddens me. It saddens me that I chose to ignore this, because I knew, and I felt myself replacing God with him. And I knew it was happening. I stopped going to church. I wasn't in a Bible study. I wasn't serving. I have a servant's heart. I have to be serving, and when I'm not, I feel that. I feel that disconnect, and so I knew that it was happening, and I just allowed it to happen. And eventually, I got married, and I started doing meth again. I lost my job.
From meth?
No. My husband and I both got laid off because the economy had plummeted. And, we were living really good. We had a really good income. We were doing really good. Our house was almost paid off. Both of our cars were almost paid off,
What kind of work were both of you doing then?
I was a sales rep, and he is a commercial floor installer. He was a commercial floor installer.
And you both get laid off at the same time?
Yes.
Okay.
But within a couple weeks.
Yeah.
And so he knew that I was in recovery from meth, and he always respected that. He always kept me away from that. And by that point, my custody battle was over. Their dad took the kids from me, but he gave them to his mom. And that was really hard for me to do, to realize, like, why, I didn't understand why that happened. But so I was a part-time mom, and here I'm trying to adjust to being a part-time mom, which when I had my kids, I knew that I was meant to be a mom.
Right.
Like, that's what I was so good at. I was such a good mom. I was such a good mom. And I knew from the time that I had them that that's what God put me here for, was to be their mom. And I just felt like I'd failed. I felt like I'd failed. And I was dealing with the loss of my job, the loss of my kids, my marriage. There's just all this stuff that was piled up. And so One night I got high with my husband. It wasn't, he hadn't been doing meth. He didn't do meth. He drank alcohol and stuff like that.
Did he buy it and bring it to you?
Yeah, it was, we were kind of in the situation where we were around friends and they had it.
Okay.
And I knew, see, he wasn't as experienced as I was. This meth has been in my life since I was a kid, and I know what it does to relationships. And I told him, I was contemplating it, and I don't, because I was spiritually weak at the time. I had let my relationship with God go. I was just barely, it was like I was just really lukewarm. I was still going to church, but I wasn't there.
No Bible study, no serving, no personal growth, no support group. Nothing.
Yeah, I could tell that I was spiritually void because I was going to church, but I felt like it was just a chore, like I had to force myself to go, and I felt myself slipping away from God, and I knew that it was me that was letting go and not him. And I still made that choice. I basically replaced God with my husband, and we ended up getting high that night, and the guilt that I would feel was something that I'll never. It was so intense that I couldn't even face myself in the mirror, and I wish that, looking back, I really wish that I would have just confessed what I did to someone and turned away from it. Mm-hmm. But that's not what I did. I just let the guilt feed me, and my addiction spiraled out of control, like really fast by that point.
So you begin using meth all the time?
All the time. All the time. My husband and I just became really strung out. My kids at that point were with their dad, and
How did you afford it?
He was really good at, buying enough and then selling so much, and
okay.
But eventually that only lasts so long when you have two habits to feed, and they're really intense habits. So eventually my husband started manufacturing methamphetamine. And by this time I had completely let go of my kids. I didn't want to do to my kids what my parents did to especially my dad did to me. And I knew that I was poisoned. I was really sick. I was never, my addiction was never the same once I had God in my heart, and he wasn't going to let it be like it used to be. And I couldn't handle it.
You're convicted by the Holy Spirit.
So convicted. Yeah. And that was just the guilt, it just turned into guilt that consumed me. And so I just let go of them. I did something that I would never thought I would do, and I abandoned my kids. I knew that I was poison, and they deserved better than what I was.
So how long do you use and deal or manufacture before consequences start to arise with the legal system?
Okay, well, at first, my husband was hiding it from me.
That he was manufacturing?
Mm-hmm. Because I told him that I really didn't want any part of that. I'll be a drug addict, but I'm not going to be a meth cook. And which, looking back, so he was hiding it from me, and my marriage was taking a turn for the worse. And he was acting, I could just see the love that he once had for me was being replaced, and I was watching it happen. And so I finally walked in on him one day manufacturing it. I remember I freaked out and told him I was leaving him, and I was quickly learned that, well, first of all, if I left him, I was leaving my connection. He was my supplier. I mean, and when you're high, you're not just going to leave the person that is supplying you. Mm-hmm. And second of all, I really didn't have anywhere to go. So I moved back in. It was ridiculous. Our relationship just turned so terrible. And manufacturing methamphetamine is such a dark world. So much stuff happens. Constant chaos, you could just see a dark dark despair is just completely surrounding you. Everybody in your life. And
Everybody's using, everybody's cooking. Anybody that's involved in that has darkness.
chaos, 24/7. It's never enough. You're always on the go. You're always doing this. You're always doing that. You're always trying to do this. You always have to go do that. And there's no rest. There's no rest. It's just constant chaos and darkness. And, everybody in your life, people are you're stealing from each other. You're hurting each other. You're using each other. And my marriage was definitely destroyed by that time. It was so destroyed.
So how much time has passed from the time you start using again to now when he's manufacturing?
About 4 years.
Oh my goodness. So you're a mess.
Hot mess.
Okay. So what happens?
I was by this point, I was the worst I'd ever been. Full blown, there was nothing left good in me. I had nothing good in me. I had nothing. I was so lost that I just, I lost my will to live. And I realized, what is the point of this? What is the point of my life? There wasn't one. Every day was the same thing, every day. And I struggled. I forgot. I was so strung out and I was so lost that I couldn't. I remember I used to try to remember what God felt like in my heart, and I couldn't remember. And I remember that broke my heart. That broke my heart because I knew when I was on fire for God, I knew what came with that, and it broke my heart that I couldn't even remember. I couldn't remember what it was like to be a mom. I couldn't remember what it was like to be a decent, respectable person. And so I lost my will to live. And I remember I had one last-ditch effort to try to get clean. So I called, my husband and I we're at this point, we're on the run. We're on the run because my husband got caught. He burnt down a car in the woods off the side of the highway. And
where he was cooking the meth.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so the car, it was just a metal frame. It was clearly a chemical fire. So he comes running home. We're on the run now. And I just remember telling him, oh my gosh, I can't do this. And I begged him to get help. And I was like, please, we've got to stop this. Because we are going to go to prison forever or die. Every day I was toying with overdosing. And by this time, I had introduced heroin in my life because meth wasn't getting me numb anymore. And so here I had this terrible meth addiction. I had this terrible heroin addiction. I had track marks all up my arm. And I was just toying with death every day. I was hoping that it would happen. And so I got on my knees and started crying and begging God. I just remember I hadn't prayed for so long, and I remember begging him to please deliver me from I just wanted to be close to him again. I wanted my kids, or I wanted to die. Those were my two options. That's what I wanted. And so I called every rehab in the phone book, but...
Where are you now?
I am in Kosciuszko County.
Okay.
I called every rehab in the phone book, but with no insurance and no money, I had no family support. It just wasn't available. And I remember that hopeless feeling that it was never going to go away. My last phone call, when my last denial, and as soon as I hung up, I knew I'm going to kill myself. I'm going to kill myself tonight. And so when my husband came home, he had just got done cooking meth. When he came home, I begged him. I begged him to stay there with me because I told him I'm going to hurt myself. And I'm not that kind of person. I'm not the kind of person that does that. And I was on the floor sobbing, and he stepped over me and left me to go cook more dope. And so I went in the bathroom, and I remember looking in the mirror, and I was so far gone. I remember I was trying to say goodbye to myself in the mirror, but I couldn't even connect with myself because it was like I was a stranger.
You're a different person than the girl that had 3 children, the girl that walked down the aisle, surrendered her life to Christ. It's just all different now. And you
Totally different.
can't even recognize
Dark
who
despair.
you've become.
I was a slave to Satan at that time. And so I remember knowing that I was really lost because I couldn't even cry. I couldn't cry, and here I am getting ready to attempt to kill myself. My husband got home several hours later and found me, and he revived me.
What had you done? Overdose?
Yeah, I shot up a bunch of heroin. And anybody that's ever done heroin, you have to be really careful when you do that because you easily overdose on that. And I don't know how I didn't. I mean, I don't know how I lived through it because I shouldn't have. But
It's a purpose God had for you.
it is the purpose God had for me. And I remember being so mad when I woke up. My husband revived me. I was so mad. I hated him for that. Because here I was, I told him, I'm suffering. Like, I just want this to stop. I just want this to stop. Just leave me alone. He really had emotionally abandoned me. And I didn't even understand why it mattered to him anymore. And so he, again, left that night to go manufacture again. At this point, he was doing it probably 3 times a day.
Manufacturing or using?
Manufacturing.
Okay.
We were using all day,
Okay.
every day. Our habits were extreme. And so as soon as he left, I went in the bathroom and I told God, I begged him, and I was like, you know what, God, I can't get help. I want help. I wanted help so bad, and I couldn't get it. It wasn't available to me. And so I begged him. I was like, this time, either let me die or send me to prison because I can't stop on my own. And so I tried to kill myself again, and the same thing happened. My husband revived me. And by this point, I was really upset.
Heroin again?
Yeah. I was really upset. I was really mad. I was really discouraged. I hated my husband. I hated myself. I hated my life. I hated everything. I mean, all I felt was, the only thing that I had inside me left was rage, hopeless rage. I mean, I was a woman with nothing else to live for.